badge of an Estonian every time I say I work for Skype, and it follows me around. Last week I was at a conference that's sponsored by Thomas Friedman, who's a famous journalist in the States. I met him, shook hands, said, "Hi, I'm Scott Miller." He has no idea who I am. I work for Skype. His eyes lit up. It's like, "Oh, Skype. I love Estonia." And you immediately refer to, there's a requirement in the grade schools. In first grade, you start learning another language. Not Spanish, not Italian, but coding. It's like, that's such a great example. The world, more of the world needs to do that.
This reminds me of something, maybe goes without saying, but the goodwill is not just, oh, Skype, great business case, I love you because of entrepreneurship. Almost everyone that knows about Skype has used the product, and if you think about it, it is like a goodwill ambassador in its own right. Helping people communicate in a rich and interesting way, first by voice, then by video, makes those people happier. When Jans and Nicholas were asked why they started Skype and why it's so successful, they in a very sort of enigmatic way say, people like to talk. It's like, it's the business opportunity. They do like it. So people come, they fawn over Skype and plugins.
If we could turn also to you gentlemen at the end over here, where do you guys see, in your case, Skype going, and where do you see more broadly the kind of Estonian tech community going? Where would you like it to go? Do you think it's going in the right direction, or what do you see coming in the next year or 2 years?
Yeah, just for Skype, real quickly, as Steve mentioned, there's 2 billion more mobile phones are going to come on the market. So for Skype, it's not only have we conquered the desktop for video calling, but we're also now conquering on mobile. And there's 2 billion more customers right out there for us to take, and so that's where the focus is. It's all about mobile and just making Skype work, in a very good way.
We largely invest in IT-based services, and I would expect most of the Estonian economy will be around internet and mobile solutions for that reason. This is multiple big things. But as biotech, just as one other example, becomes more information service. There are universities we talk to elsewhere in the country that have a bit of expertise there, applying it in new industrial markets like energy and clean tech. And when that becomes an information service, that also is quite interesting. We have one investment already that takes advantage of the access to genomic information and the fact that with a centralized healthcare system, you don't have to worry about the privacy or denial of service that might occur in Western economy with heterogeneous providers, getting to that personal genomics feature. So countries like Estonia, perhaps for different reasons, are well set to usher into a sort of post-genomics era.
Taavi, can you talk, on that same note, can you talk a little bit about, the president alluded to it, but I'm not sure that everybody in the room fully understands what your company does and how it's disruptive, as Steve mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what TransferWise does and why I think it's a really cool idea.
Sure. So the idea for TransferWise really came from a personal experience when I was working for Skype. At one point I moved to London and I was still getting paid in Estonia. So every month I went to the bank and made a transfer, and every month I saw how the bank is taking a large part of my money transfer. I met Christo, who is now my co-founder, and he was living in London. He had sent some money to Estonia. So he was similarly getting screwed by the bank on a monthly basis. And then we just realized that, hey, we can utilize the same Skype peer-to-peer principle, and instead of transferring some money, we just give money to each other in the respective countries. So we started doing this, and very quickly we realized that, hey, we save thousands of pounds in bank fees. And thousands of pounds in bank fee equals to a month's of vacation back in those days. So we then started thinking that there are many other people besides us who needed a similar service, and we built TransferWise from it. So now we've been live for about 2 years. We've helped people transfer hundreds of millions of dollars around the world and save around $10 million in bank fees. It's based on the same peer-to-peer principle as Skype is based, and based on providing a modern-day financial service on the internet. Having to wait 5 days for money to get there and all that stuff is not cool anymore these days.
Where do you see your business going in the future? Oh, sorry, excuse me. It's hard to move back. Okay, sorry, Mr. President, please.
I just have, if you ask about future directions, there are also other areas that I see Estonia moving and playing a significant role. 2 weeks ago, there was published a report, a joint study by the OECD and the European Commission looking at the state of e-health care in Europe, surveying 30 countries. Estonia was #1. The reason why Estonia was #1 in all of Europe, plus the several countries not in the EU, is precisely because of the platform that we have developed in the country, which is based on, well, which I'm sure that Taavi can explain it far better than I. But the point is that since we have all these services, among them health records, we have a digital prescription service. You can take out your prescription anywhere in the country. These services and the way we do it, I think, or should become the standard model in Europe. Because Europe, while it's big and has 500 million people, every country, I mean, the countries are all rather small, and their people are very mobile. So things such as healthcare services, health records, prescriptions, should be available across the continent, regardless of where you are. My vision is that the kind of approach we have with an enterprise service bus, and Taavi can explain that, is something that is extremely scalable and exportable. And since no one else really has done this anywhere at the level of the state, that my hope is that the European Commission will take some of these ideas seriously and develop it across the EU, so it's not available just in a small country of 1.3 million. Certainly we see a lot of interest from the outside. I mean, our system has now been adopted by the Palestinian Authority, by Moldova. We've explained it, and there's a tremendous amount of interest in a number of countries in the post-Arab Spring, Arab world. But where I see its greatest functionality is in Europe itself.
All right.
Just have a good news about that. Even though we are #1 in e-health, I can say that we will wipe it off and we will rebuild it. Because why? These systems were built in 2003, 2004, so it's 10 years ago. And 10 years back it was top technology, all web-based, etc., etc. But there was no touchscreens. And if you see what are the current user habits, and then the laws has changed, the technology has changed, the user habits has changed, so you need to continuously re-engineer your stuff, because if you don't do that, it's legacy. So I think one thing to be proud of is that our companies, our private companies and our government, they have understanding that you have to re-engineer your software at least after every 7-8 years, completely. And then the investments are really good, and the results you can see them.
But we shouldn't forget cyber defense. Well, the EU is looking to Estonia.
That's true. Yeah, the European Union, spearheaded by some of the efforts from President Ilves, Estonia is spearheading the cyber defense efforts in the European Union as a whole. And as many of you know, Estonia was hit by a cyber attack believed to have come from Russia, and as a result, that spawned a NATO Center for Excellence in Cyber Defense. And there's a famous conference that happens every summer. I believe it just happened a few weeks ago in Tallinn. While we have a little bit more time left, I believe, I would love to open it up to the floor to see if anybody has questions for the gentleman here and Mr. President online. I'm seeing a hand over here. And is there another mic that we can give this gentleman, or should I pass my mic to him? Okay, there's a mic coming to you now.
Yeah, over here. Burton Lake, Stanford University. Thank you. So those of you who watched the space scene may have heard about the release of PayPal Galactica a couple of days ago. When can we expect to hear about Skype Galactica being released?
I think there's a pragmatic streak within Estonia as well.
Since Estonia already has a space program, we're going to be seeing...
Well, there's a satellite flying right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I chuckle and I invest a lot in space-related projects. So I don't really think there's a thriving market for space currency quite yet.
I agree.
Be a little ahead of the ball. Looking at relativistic effects when you go near the speed of light and having payment system clear, that's just a little forward.
Sure, so you're saying this is more buzz and PR than anything
Buzz
else?
and Buzz Aldrin.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we are going to have the Bigelow modules on orbit in a couple of years. We're going to have Richard Branson's people actually starting first flights, George Whitehouse, in just, hopefully 18 months, flying out of Spaceport America. So we will be seeing potentially a few dozens of people from the edge of space being able to make calls, if not payment transfers. So actually Skype Galactica might make a little bit more sense than PayPal Galactica for a 2-minute call. Just an idea.
Like in the movies.
There's a question here up front from the gentleman in red, I believe. Right? Andres.
I'm Eilif Tronsen. I'm with Silicon Vikings, and we talked about e-health, and I'm wondering why couldn't the e-health platform that Estonia has built be adopted in the Nordic countries as a basis for then moving on to the rest of Europe? So what are the obstacles for the other Nordic countries adopting that platforms? Is it because they have their own platform that they're trying to push? What's the likelihood of us getting a Nordic platform for e-health?
Okay, yeah, I can answer that. Scandinavia still has that problem called not invented here. They still have. It changed. Currently, Estonia is working actively with Finland because we want to put our core infrastructure together. We want to build our core infrastructure together during next years. But yes, they still have this not invented here problem. The second issue is current Estonian solutions are so advanced that they all use this ID card. They use other Estonian basic solutions, and as other countries don't have these basic solutions, it's not only e-health system you have to implement, it's also you have to implement the ID card, etc. So the entry level is bigger than just the e-health system. So that's the second reason, I think.
Other questions? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, excuse me.
One factor, the same OECD EU Commission report listed the next 3 countries in quality of e-services as Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. So the Nordic countries are doing also fairly well, and so they couldn't hear exactly what Taavi said, but there are a couple of things. One is that the other countries either don't have an ID card system that is spread across the country, or they're using an insufficiently secure ID card system, one or the other. And it's either sort of penetration or it's quality of security. And so, and that requires political will. Either to get everyone, say, in a country like Finland that uses a system like ours, or at least the ID card, to then go from having 75,000 people using it to 5.5 million. And in the case of the other 2 Nordic countries, well, they have to eat crow and admit that the bank-based ID system they use does not offer the required level of security.
Other questions?
It's more a comment than a question, and it goes back to how things started in Estonia. I think there were 2 things that coincided. One was Hendrik Ilves' suggestion of the jump of the tiger. We should bypass things, jump high and far with computers. And 2 was that the University of Tartu from Toronto sent 106 computers to Estonia in January 1990, which gave thousands of students at the university a chance to learn about computers. I think those 2 coincidences helped things get started. And my quick final comment is, apropos Estonia being a small country, and as we heard, rather well known, a friend of mine in Ottawa, Professor Miljan, was a member of an important commission at the parliamentary sittings, and while there are 20,000 Estonians in Canada, or people with Estonian extraction, the comment there was, there must be at least 300,000 of you for the profile that you have.
Other questions in the back there?
Just a quick question. What time is it right now? Hi, I'm Taavet from Mobile Now. Just curious, what time is it right now in Estonia, and when does the sun set there? Or is that a real background there?
It is. It's 9 p.m.
It's 8:50, or rather, it's 20:58 here, and the sun sets, but it doesn't really get dark here this time of year.
Summer's a wonderful time to be in Estonia. The first 3 times I was in Estonia was in the winter and there was snow up to here, which is, fun in a different way. Other questions? In the front.
Hi. In Silicon Valley, we've recently seen an uptick or maybe a return of interest to hardware startups like the Nest thermostat, Electric Inn, and of course we have Elon Musk making his money on the internet and then doing what he really wants to do, which is solar power, electric cars, and space rockets. Are you seeing now, or do you foresee a hardware development scene in Estonia? Or in other words, I'm sick of mobile apps. I want things I can hold in my hand.
I can speak in general, but not about
I think there are a couple of things happening in hardware in Estonia already. So there are a couple of accessories built for phones, etc. So recently we saw there was a team of Estonians who took part in a robotic competition somewhere in the US, which was, I think, pretty hardcore hardware development. So I think
Moon rover.
Yes, the moon rover. So I think we're seeing things happening in hardware in Estonia as well as everywhere else. It's still a much smaller ecosystem than computer software.
I would say just in general, it's an interesting trend. In the past, hardware businesses were really bad ones for startups, and venture firms generally lost money on them. Other than Apple, if you go back in time, there isn't really any wish you invested in. That's all changing though. If you think of the iPhone as an example, so there's a real dematerialization of the object in a highlighting of the code. So in robotics, it's not, is this the latest and greatest piece of hardware? It's what's the software running on this robot? The human robots, particularly Baxter for Rethink. And similarly in mobile solutions, in all of these areas that are light, hardware light, it's the software that leads. With Elon and SpaceX and Tesla, we're involved with both of those. Those are big pieces of hardware. But many of the advances came both by a software insight on how to build modular reuse in a system rocket, and also, of course, in a fast failure cycle, both products. The first rocket used object programming, the car obviously with upgrades with the wire. So I think that'll be more the metaphor of the future, much like the phone being dematerialized, the buttons go away, it's software upgrades. Same for physical artifacts of all world. And the hardware becomes the dollar account.
Just commenting, I think all 3G and 4G components for Ericsson are coming from Estonia. And also, yeah, we are building drones, displays, and also this smart house concept, etc. But yes, it's true that our software world is more developed than our electronics.
One hardware startup that I met actually at an event here in the Valley not long ago was an Estonian startup called Click and Grow, which is a cool little startup. Basically what they do is they sell little plants and little boxes that have batteries that go along with those plants. So if you're somebody that likes to have fresh tomatoes like me, but can't be bothered to actually do the work to actually grow the tomatoes, you can have a little device that you basically just set it to run and it grows whatever it is. So flowers, tomatoes, chilies, whatever. So I think that's a really cool Estonian startup. Other questions? I think we have time for one more question. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Ruth Amos. I work with healthcare IT performance improvement for Ernst & Young. And I'm very intrigued on Estonian as well, and I will be visiting in August. But my question to you is, Mr. President and others on the panel, as you know, the United States is going through tremendous change in healthcare, especially with IT. And if you had 3 top things that you would recommend for the United States over the next 5 years, based on your experience, what would that be?
Did you catch that, Mr. President?
If you could repeat the question because it didn't come through.
Sure. She was talking about e-health, and if I understood it correctly, she was asking what are the top 2 or 3 changes that you would like to see in the United States given the Estonian experience in e-health?
Well, I mean, given the aversion of Americans, or I would even say the Anglosphere, to ID cards, then if you don't have I mean, the key to basically everything that involves security is in cyberspace involves a secure identity. That is the key. If you don't have a secure identity, you can never be sure of who's online and who's doing what. The analogy is having someone rings your doorbell, and you click the intercom, and someone says, "It's me, honey," but in fact, it's not honey. It turns out it's someone who has a tape recording of the voice. And so in order to have a secure and authenticated ID, you need to have a system that involves an authentication system with a chip and a two-factor identity authentication. Now, that's not on for the United States, I don't think. An HMO can do it perhaps, but at a larger level it's not, or larger scale, I think that there's a visceral objection to using a system like that we have, and that will limit people's trust in the system, because who knows who can go into looking at your medical records. I mean, I trust the system in Estonia, as do all the people who use the system. But when I talk about it to people either in the UK or in Canada or in the United States, they say that would never happen in my country because we do not believe in IDs.
Thank you very much to these gentlemen here. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Andrus and our Estonian friends who put on this event. And thank you to all of you.